What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the review space. In this video, I'm going to talk about the top 30 PlayStation 2 games of all time. That's right, the top 30 greatest PS2 games from my opinion, and this is straight out of my collection, my library, the games that I really enjoyed and loved playing. Basically, these are the keepers, the must-haves, the games that you should play and you should try. And if you have a PS2, I highly recommend getting these games and trying them out at least once and getting to a chance to play them, basically. And I'm going to begin from number 30, so it's going to be number 30 all the way up to number 1, which is number 1 is the greatest video game in the PS2 library. But coming in at number 30 is Urban Chaos Riot Response. This one came out in 2006. And this is definitely one of the more underrated first-person shooters on the PlayStation 2. I believe this also came out on the original Xbox. But I got the PS2 version. I beat this game years and years and years ago. And it still is a very good, solid first-person shooter. And I don't think a lot of people really played this game. I don't think a lot of people know about it or even have experienced it. And so I think that with Urban Chaos Riot Response, some of the best features about this game is that you're able to use a riot shield, and it has a very gritty action first-person shooter. You know, a lot of chaotic moments in there, a lot of fire, a lot of explosions. Well, some explosions anyway, and you're facing off against a lot of enemies, and you gotta get through these missions, and it can be quite difficult and challenging at times. So I also believe that this is from the same people who developed the later Arkham series, the Batman Arkham games. But this was a solid installment in the FPS genre, especially for the PlayStation 2. I believe I also included this in my top 10 best PS2 first-person shooters from a couple of years ago. I made that list, I think, in 2015. But anyway, highly recommend that you guys check it out. Urban Chaos Riot Response, great action, and this is one of those games that it was fun enough that I beat it all the way up to the end. You know, most games I either get too bored with it or I just don't have enough motivation to finish the whole thing, and I get tired of it and I move on to the next game. But this one is fun enough and fun and enjoyable enough to want to keep playing it all the way up to the end. Alright, number 29 is Smugglers Run. Yes, Smugglers Run. This is the game that I was talking about in that top 100 PS2 games list review that I did from, I think, List Challenges. And this is the one that I was talking about when I was talking about Twisted Metal Black. And I was talking about how there's a Rockstar game that was better than this. I think I called it an ATV racer from the early 2000s. It's actually not ATV. It's Dune Buggy. It's these Dune Buggy vehicles that you're basically driving this vehicle. It's a racing game, a driving game, and you're driving around these massive desert areas. Most of it is desert, you know, out in the outside, you know, basically out in the dirt, and a lot of dirt levels and stages. But it's quite a fun, enjoyable racing title because this is a very early look into what the third-person 3D Rockstar games and open-world games of GTA would end up becoming. Like, you could see an early template for especially the driving in GTA and the racing in GTA. Smugglers Run gives you that early perspective and that early feel and the early controls of those the racing segments in GTA. You know, the physics and the vehicle physics and all that, captured it in Smugglers Run, and this is a pretty fun game from the early 2000s. It's a very early title. I believe it came out around, I don't know if it's like October 2000, so right around when the PS2 was released in North America in 2000, so you're talking about something from over 17 years ago. So this game, I got it quite late too in the PS2 library. I think I got it around like 2010 or something like that. So I got it like a decade after it already came out. So I was really curious because it had a Rockstar label on it. I've never heard of it before. So I popped it in and started playing it, and I was really hooked. I thought it was really enjoyable, and it was quite addictive. The racing segment especially because, again, it is a classic, those classic Rockstar controls. with the racing segments, you're basically going from checkpoint to checkpoint here, and a lot of it is timing based, and you have to beat the timer. You have to beat the timer. You have to get this. You have to deliver this package or this parcel to the next checkpoint, and you got to beat the timer. So it's a fun game. It's in comparison to something like Twisted Metal Black. Twisted Metal Black is more vehicular combat, where this one is strictly more racing and beating the timer. So, but in that regard, they're both like racing games in the wilderness or in the desert, large spacious areas. And Smuggler's Run is much more enjoyable, much more fun than Twisted Metal Black. I guarantee you. And it's just more enjoyable. It's more fun. I wish I still had it in many ways. It's just I think I got rid of it a few years ago because I couldn't beat it. I got up to a point in the game where I just couldn't beat it anymore. I'm like, I'm stuck. Like, I'm not good enough to beat this game, and so I was like, I gotta get rid of it. I'm never gonna beat this game. So, coming in at number 28 is Sega Genesis Collection. This one came out in 2006 on, I believe, on multiple platforms too. It also came out on the PSP and maybe I'm not sure. Well, yeah, the PS2 and the PSP, I know that for sure. But this is the Genesis Collection, classic Mega Drive / Genesis games, and I will be including collection and compilation in this list because guess what? These games came out on the PS2. This is an official PS2 game, right? So the Genesis Collection is an official PS2 title. So just because it's a collection of old games that came out on previous consoles, it doesn't mean that, well, you can only talk about it on the previous consoles. No, you can talk about it on the PS2 because now it's available on the PS2. And all the games that's available on the Genesis Collection, you can play on the PS2. It's part of the PS2 library. So, and the games that's included in the Genesis Collection is Sonic, the first Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and Restar. And all these classic titles on the Sega Genesis that, Comic Zone and Vector Man 2, all these great games that originally came out in the Genesis is now a part of the PS2 experience. You can play it on the PS2 as part of the Genesis Collection. So it's a worthy collection. I play it constantly on the PSP, but I also have it on the PlayStation 2. And I think it's a must-have because, it has a great legacy, a great collection of older, late 80s, early 90s 2D games, and a lot of them are really fun. Especially something like Restar. Restar is such an underrated platforming video game. And I believe that came out so late in the Genesis lifespan that it barely got attention or any kind of hype because the Genesis was already kind of on its way out and it was being replaced by the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation 1. But regardless, awesome collection to have. I always enjoy playing the original Sonic games on this collection. Sonic 1 especially, great music and all that, great gameplay. It's classic Genesis roster, what I'm saying? I think it also has the Phantasy Star, a couple of the Phantasy Star games, and the Golden Axe games, a couple of Golden Axe titles, the Shinobi games. So these are really good, solid 2D action platforming type of games, and a few RPGs as well. And it's for anybody that grew up in the 90s, anybody that loved the early 90s arcadey gameplay and the Genesis experience. And even if you didn't grow up on the Genesis and you grew up on the Super Nintendo, you'll have a lot to appreciate with the Genesis Collection. A lot of the games are challenging, especially like Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is still a really challenging game. It's one of the harder platformers. It's a little bit more difficult than Mario, for example. Compare Sonic the Hedgehog to Super Mario World. As much as I love Mario World, I think that Sonic the Hedgehog is a lot more punishing, and it forces you to keep playing it over and over again because, this game, there's no, it's just the way it was meant to be played. You're not given any, I don't think, you can't save it. You can't save it in the middle of gameplay. I mean, you can save the file and save other accomplishments it'll have autosave in it, but you can't really freeze frame in the middle of the action. I mean, that's not how it's meant to be played. It's meant to be played the way that they set it up as the Sega Genesis games originally back in the day. Nobody's holding your hand as you play through these games. So if you want some challenge, get the Sega Genesis collection. Awesome stuff. Alright, coming in at number 27 is Tekken 4. This one came out in 2002, but I believe a little bit earlier in the arcades, but on the PlayStation 2 console, came out in 2002. Solid fighting game. And this one feels a lot different, or at least a little bit different compared to the other Tekken video games. A lot of the Tekken games, especially the earlier ones, have these open-ended stages where you can basically keep doing combos over and over again, and there's no walls, so you don't feel closed in. This one is the complete opposite. Tekken 4 has closed-in stages, a lot of walled-in. Pretty much every single one of them, I think, has a walled-in stage, which basically means that your strategy has to be a little bit different. Your strategy involves the wall. So if you're doing a combo and it gets cut off by hitting a wall, you gotta factor that in and change up your combo, and just dealing with that and adding new combos and being able to maneuver around the wall limitations. And as far as the presentation of this game, great music. I love the soundtrack of this game. It's got a lot of atmosphere and a lot of it makes you really feel it's got a dark, somber soundtrack, and it really adds to the atmosphere of the video game of Tekken 4. Because the storyline is kind of a darker edge story compared to other fighting games. It's not as lighthearted as other fighting games. It's a little bit more serious and darker in nature, and it involves the Mishima family and their intertwined turmoils and rivalries between the families and all that. So it can be a little bit dark and serious at times, but still a really solid fighting game that it's good. I wouldn't say that it's the greatest on the PS2, but it's top 30 material, and it's different enough, I think, compared to the other fighting games, that it's unique enough, and there's enough of a learning curve that is enjoyable in this game. And it's something that they also have a Tekken Force. A Tekken Force is basically this beat 'em up mode, this extra mode in the game where you play one of the characters and you get to beat up all these different enemies and these bad guys, these generic soldiers. I believe they're part of the I don't know, like the Zaibatsu soldiers or whatever the heck they are, and you're constantly beating them up in different various stages, and it's a fun beat 'em up. It's basically a really fun beat 'em up mode. So great music, pretty good graphics for the early 2000s, and it's a solid fighting game. So Tekken 4 it's up there. It's a pretty good fighter. Number 26 is God Hand from 2006. Now, God Hand is a beat 'em up with some pretty slick combos, and I guess it's kind of a cult game now. Over the years, I should say, it's become sort of a cultish game, or it's got a cult following because it's got this really good gameplay, and it's kind of underrated. It never became this super famous, highly selling, top selling title on the PS2, and it came out fairly late on the PS2's lifespan. So when they put out this game, it was like, yeah, the PS2 is kind of on its way out, and whatever. It was just kind of dismissed as, oh, just another beat 'em up, just another generic beat 'em up. But actually, God Hand is pretty darn fun, man. I mean, the combo system in this game is really cool because you get to customize it, and over the course of the game, as you progress through the different stages and you keep going, you get to unlock other combos and other moves and different combinations to attack your opponents, and to how to effectively defeat the enemies. And it's very challenging. This game doesn't mess around. It's not your easy romp. It's not a video game that holds your hand throughout the game. It's quite difficult. It's quite challenging. It's for anybody that grew up enjoying the beat 'em ups like Final Fight and those kind of games, Streets of Rage. This one is very difficult, especially in later stages, and as you try to beat the later bosses in the game. the most negative thing I can say about it is the repetitive music. The music does get really repetitive, and the graphics are not particularly good. The graphics actually look very dated and very unimpressive, especially for 2006. So even back then when it came out, it was like, the environments are not that impressive, they're not that cool looking. You know, it's not visual eye candy, but I think the gameplay makes up for it. It's a really fun game, and if I'm not mistaken, it's available on the PSN for the PlayStation 3 and, you know, the modern consoles. Alright, coming in at number 25, Devil May Cry from 2001. Yeah, another early action-adventure title. Devil May Cry is from Capcom, an original, you know, PS2 exclusive, solid action-adventure, solid hack-and-slash type of gameplay, good graphics, pretty cool-looking environments, and I already gave you my thoughts about it when it came to this game. I talked about it a little bit more with the top 100 list on the list challenges video that I did earlier. But DMC, I really think it's a solid entry, and I enjoyed it from beginning to end. You know, it took me a while to beat it just because, you know, some of the bosses got kind of difficult. But after a while, you kind of get used to the gameplay, and you know how to maneuver around the game and to, you know, exploit his strengths. And I like the structure of the stage designs. I like how you go from one section of the game and then you kind of come full circle. That's been adapted by later video games and later titles that kind of ripped off ideas from Devil May Cry, you know, other action-adventure titles out there. It's a solid game, you know. I wouldn't put it up higher, though, than number 25, because it's a good game, but I think that in many ways it's been eclipsed by other action-adventure games. You know, it's a good one, though, and it's very influential for sure. And I dig DMC. It's not something that I would keep going back to, but that very first time that I played it and beat it, it was very enjoyable. Coming in at number 24. Number 24 is Resident Evil 4, released in early 2005. And this one came out on a couple of platforms, I should say, when it was first released, PS2 and the GameCube. And I enjoyed it on the PlayStation 2. I mean, I think it's one of the more solid horror games, or action games with horror elements, third-person shooter with some survival horror elements in there. Good game, you know, pretty cool, smooth flow throughout the experience. It felt like you're riding in a movie set piece, or different movie set pieces. You know what I'm saying? So you're in the middle of the forest, you're in the middle of a lake, you're underground, you know, you're inside a castle, you got to save the princess, you know, you're riding on the back of a dump truck as you're shooting zombies, you know. And you know, there's certain moments in this game that was quite memorable, or quite awesome experiences. I would go like, that was a really cool moment, that was really fun. And specifically that dump truck moment where the zombies would come out very slowly and they would try to attack your character. You know, that was quite epic. Other moments, like when you help the dog, or I think was it a dog or a wolf? I think it might have been a wolf, and you rescue this wolf, this canine, from a trap. I think it was a bear trap. And then later on, as you're fighting a boss, you're fighting a giant Las Plagas monster, giant. This dog comes in and helps you, and that's provided that if you rescue the dog to begin with, or I should say the wolf, if you rescued it from the beginning. So it kind of gave you that option of rescuing, you know, and then you getting rewarded for helping out this creature. So Resident Evil 4 has its really cool, memorable moments. I just felt like Ashley was kind of a lame character. She was kind of useless, you know, just a damsel in distress. So I did not like Ashley, even though, you know, she was just basically a plot device, a reason for you to go into this stupid castle with these creepy, hooded, cult evil guys, you know. But overall, it's still a pretty fun game on the PS2, because, yeah, you know, I mean, there's a lot worse games than Resident Evil 4, I guarantee you, on the PlayStation 2. And this one is a, you know, really well-made game. You can tell that the developers, you know, Capcom, they really took their time to create a fun, enjoyable, movie-esque, save the princess type of video game. Number 23. Number 23 is Street Fighter Alpha Anthology. Man, Capcom is really all over this list, especially early on. Yeah, this one is from 2006, a collection of the Street Fighter Alpha series. One of the best anthologies, one of the best fighting game collections for sure on the PS2. They have several on the PlayStation 2, but this one is one of the better ones simply because it's the Alpha series. The Alpha series has been really flashy. Great mid-late 90s fighting games that came out on the, I believe it was the 5th generation? The PS1 era, the Sega Saturn era, so we're talking about 95, 96, 97, 98, around that time. So the Alpha series, it's a good series. It's a good fighting game series, great 2D fighting games, very addictive, very fun. So if you grew up on fighting games like me, especially the ones like Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat from the early 90s, this one is really fun. This one is quite enjoyable and something that you should check out. It's worth playing. And from what I understand, it included, because I got this, I haven't played it in a while, but it has the original Alpha, Alpha 2, I think there's Alpha 3, and there's a gold in there. And there's also like a Pocket Fighter, which is this chibi form of the Alpha characters. And it's just it's a flashy set of fighting games, and you can't go wrong. Multiplayer, one-on-one against another opponent. It's classic Street Fighter action for sure. All right, coming in at number 22 is The Incredible Hulk: Ultimate Destruction from 2005. Man, this game is just action-packed, man. One of the better superhero / comic book based video games on the PlayStation 2 generation. Awesome game. This game has a lot of action, a lot of fun, enjoyable things to do. You basically just get to destroy everything. I mean, that's the premise of this game. You're the Incredible Hulk, and you're beating down everything, and you're destroying armies and vehicles and all kinds of assault vehicles coming at you. Everybody is coming to attack you, and your job as the Incredible Hulk is to jump around like a maniac, like a giant angry bullfrog with huge muscles, and destroying everything in your path. And that includes buildings and cars and all that stuff. So it gives you some free roaming, open world kind of feeling, and just destroy everything. It's like a playground, and you definitely feel empowered. It's a really fun game to play. It's also a precursor or an early version of what would later become games like Prototype on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and the Prototype series, and maybe even Infamous to a certain degree. So that element of being a really powerful character, and you're jumping around and you're climbing buildings and you're running across buildings, you're scaling these huge buildings, and you're jumping around like a complete powerful powerful demigod almost. You're destroying everything in your path, and pretty much nothing can stop you. So this is a really fun game. I highly recommend it to anybody that enjoys the Hulk, and any of the Marvel games. I mean, this one is one of the best, hands down. So Ultimate Destruction from 2005. Alright, number 21 is Tekken Tag Tournament from 2000. I believe this came out in the late 90s in arcades, but this one is the PS2 version. One of the earliest PS2 games that ever came out. Tekken Tag Tournament is a very fun fighting game. I've talked about this before. I love how you can switch out between two characters. It's got the open-ended stages like the earlier Tekken games, so it doesn't have the walled-in stages of Tekken 4, so we're not quite there yet. So it still gives you that freedom, that breath of fresh air. You feel more liberated, I guess, and it's fun. It's quite addictive. The graphics are still pretty good. Even though it is quite dated compared to the later Tekken games and other fighting games after that, it still looks good. It still is a very enjoyable, fun title, and I enjoy Tekken Tag Tournament. It's one of the better party games out there where you can just bust it out and play it amongst different people. Coming in at number 20. Oh, by the way, I forgot. Tekken Tag Tournament also has that really fun bowling mode. It's got Tekken Bowl, which is basically this just random bowling segment that you can play, and it's quite fun. Like, it's one of the better bowling video game interpretations of what bowling is. You know, like actual bowling with the pins and everything. So it's fun. It's included in the game, and it's really quite addictive. So every time that you hit a strike, and you keep hitting strikes, it feels addictive, and it feels very rewarding. It feels very rewarding when you win in the stupid bowling. It's just, I don't know, just dumb, fun, addictive gameplay. Okay, coming in at number 20, WWE Smackdown: Here Comes the Pain. This one was released in 2003. An enjoyable pro wrestling game. This is one of the better, if not the best, professional wrestling game on the PS2. Here Comes the Pain has a huge roster. It's got great gameplay, and it's fast enough. The gameplay is fast enough, with the grappling system and everything. It's quick enough and arcadey enough, and it hasn't quite reached that mid-2000s SmackDown versus Raw gameplay where they slow everything down. It feels more like a simulation. This one is a mix between the late 90s N64 Revenge of the Sith, like fast-paced gameplay that's completely arcadey, and it's a great mix between that and the simulation feel of what would become the super simulated, heavy, slow-down gameplay of the mid-2000s wrestling game. So it's somewhere in between. But that's what makes it great, is because it's got this great roster, a lot of tons of different modes and modes of matches that you can play. And again, the roster is just so massive here, and it's got a lot of different legends. It's a really impressive wrestling game. I think for a long time, for like, I don't know, like 10, 11 years, it was still considered the best pro wrestling game of all time, At least up to that point, like from 2003 to like 2013, it's still considered the best professional wrestling game for a very, very long time. Alright, moving on. Number 19, Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. This one was released in 2004. The sequel to Sands of Time from last year, the previous year, 2003. This was the second installment in the 3D versions of the Prince of Persia series. This is my favorite out of the trilogy, actually. And I generally enjoyed all three games. I thought all three of them were unique and different. The first one, Sands of Time, was a bit more lighthearted and more like Disney characters. And not saying that it was, completely family-friendly, but it was a lot more for a younger audience and for rated E for everyone. I'm saying? Like, it was more lighthearted and more humorous. Whereas Warrior Within was a little bit darker and a little bit more. They tried to be a little bit more edgy with it. The character himself was a little bit more serious, the Prince character, and even the soundtrack was more metal sounding or hard rock sounding. And when it came to the third installment, which was the Two Thrones, that one was also a little bit different because it had the Dark Prince alter ego, which had a bit more melee attacks. So all three were really, really good, like well-made games that are worth checking out simply because of the gameplay. That's what makes it really stand out, is the controls, scaling the walls, the platforming is really fun, very addictive, and I can go back to these games over and over again. Maybe not as much as other titles, but this is one of those games where I want to play it every couple of years or so and go back to the Prince of Persia series. And these three games are just classic titles. I mean, they really are must play. But Warrior Within is my personal favorite out of all of them. I don't want. It feels wrong to like exclude one of the Prince of Persia titles from greatest PS2 games list, especially a top 30 where there's a lot of room and a lot of space to put these games in. Warrior Within, like I said before, love the music. I thought it fit well with the mood of the character, a little bit more serious, a little bit darker. He's not as wisecracking as the first Sands of Time Prince. And it's sexier, it features more hot-looking chicks and female characters. It it just is I love it. I think it's great visually. Like the graphics are cool, the stage designs are cool, and it is a well-made game. I love it. I'm getting excited just thinking about playing it again. So Prince of Persia: Warrior Within, I think, is the best out of the trilogy, but all three of them are really good. Coming in at number 18, NBA Street Volume 2. This one was released in 2003. This is probably the most fun NBA basketball game I've ever played. Or just basketball video game, period. Really enjoyable. Now, I got all the volumes. I got Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. I don't know if they came out with a Volume 4, but I got the first three. Out of the three, this one's my favorite because it's got better graphics than Volume 1, and it also has great gameplay and all that, but like it's got these great looking stages, and you can face off against these classic legends. You face off against legends, these legendary, Dr. J and all that, and these legendary NBA figures from history. So it's got this great mix. I enjoyed Volume 3 too. Volume 3 gets a shout out. But Volume 2, I think, is where it peaked, where, I would give it like a 9 out of 10 or an 8.9 or something like that, like a really high score. Whereas with the other ones, especially, Volume 1 and Volume 3, they're a little bit lower. I give them maybe like an 8 or an 8.5, something like that. So with NBA Street Volume 2, great graphics, fun gameplay, very addictive. You want to keep going in the storyline. You want to keep beating the opponents again and again and again. You want to keep playing it. And I got pretty far with the game. I don't remember if I actually beat it or finished it all the way up to the very end, but I did get pretty far when I first played it, and quite an enjoyable sports game and basketball game. So I highly recommend NBA Street Volume 2. The gameplay is easy, accessible to pick up and play. It's not these super difficult, like the NBA 2K series. Those games have always given me a hard time because I always felt they were so simulator heavy. But with the NBA Street series, they're more arcadey, more fun, more for casual, And when I say casual, I don't mean like in a bad way, but in a good, like, okay, it's easy to pick up and play. It's for everybody. Anybody can play it and enjoy it. Alright, number 17. Number 17 is Sniper Elite. This one came out in 2005. A classic shooter. This is a World War II game. There's historical elements to it, great presentation, and I just love the gameplay. This game is one of the best like shooters on the PlayStation 2 by far. I think it also came out on the original Xbox. And completely underrated too, because like nobody ever talks about this game. Nobody ever says like, "Oh, this is one of the best," yada yada yada. And I was lucky enough to stumble across stumble across this game. And this was before the sequels started coming out. Before like Sniper Elite V2 and Sniper Elite 3 and all these other sequels started coming out in this decade, in the 2010s. The first Sniper Elite, for a long time, for many years, when it came out in the mid-2000s, was one of a kind. It was the only game in the style of its kind that I could remember, as far as like having that specific sniper gameplay, where you're a soldier in World War II and you're roaming around these destroyed, rubble-ridden cities, and you're sniping enemies. So you're targeting them from very long distances, and then you gotta do everything you can to aim properly and take into consideration the wind. Like even the wind can affect your aim. So it's just really fun to play, and it's a long, extensive storyline as well. So you got to be a master at it, and you got to, I guess the negative part of it would be the graphics. You got to deal with the crummy looking graphics. Admittedly, hasn't really aged well. It's kind of like Gears of War in that everything looks very muddy and brown and just this crappy looking. Everything looks kind of brownish in color, or sepia tone. So that aside, the graphics aside, it still is a very fun, enjoyable title. Sniper Elite from 2005. Number 16 is Fight Night Round 3. Fight Night Round 3 is a classic awesome boxing game. It's probably the best boxing game I've ever played. This one came out in 2006. There's been a couple of these Fight Night round games. It's not the only one. This one is round 3, so there's been, round 2 and, a bunch of other ones. And it's enjoyable. I mean, I love the gameplay. I love the combat system, the combat engine. The controls is really fun and addictive. It feels very satisfying when you knock out your opponent. There's a lot of strategy involved, a lot of timing-based combat there. So when you control a boxer. So whatever your character is, whatever boxer, and you can choose between like different legends, and you can create your own character. You can customize your own original fighter and have them go through the ranks and fight increasingly harder opponents throughout his campaign. It's a fun, really fun boxing game. It's probably the best boxing game on the PS2 from the mid-2000s, and I highly recommend it to anybody that loves a fighting element and that one-on-one, mano-a-mano gameplay. Very fun and satisfying when you start winning. Number 15 is Timesplitters II, came out in 2002. A classic first-person shooter. I've already talked about this game. I already reviewed it on my channel, so I don't think I really need to elaborate much except great multiplayer, great music, and great selection of different characters. It's a very addictive shooter from the early 2000s. Alright, number 14, King of Fighters Collection, the Orochi Saga. That's right, we got another collection here, another fighting game collection, and this one is probably the best one out of all of them. Out of every single one that you can think of on the PS2, this one is probably the most complete, or the best overall value. The Orochi Saga, so this one, I think this one originally came out in Japan in 2006, but not in North America. In North America, it would come out, I think, around 2008 on the PlayStation 2, with a couple of more games. So it goes from the King of Fighters, I think from the first one, like 94 or 95, all the way up to like 98. So it's got multiple games, I think 94, 95, 96, 97, 98. So at least 5 separate King of Fighters titles. This is the Orochi Saga from the 90s, the classic ones, and very fun stuff from SNK. SNK has put out so many fighting game collections. They've had Fatal Fury Collection and Art of Fighting and Samurai Showdown, all these different classic 2D fighting games from the SNK library. But this King of Fighters thing is really fun, really addictive, great looking graphics, great animation, great sprites. I love the animation and the sprites and the little, it's so cartoonish. But they all have their own little charm. Pretty cool music. Some of the games have really cool, really catchy music, especially the ones the earlier ones, like 94, 95. A huge roster. A lot of these games, they have just a massive roster of fighters to choose from. Men and women and fat guys and big guys and small guys. So all kinds of different looks and appearances and variety in the selection. But with a mid-90s charm to every single one of them. Like they all look like like celebrities, like Japanese celebrities from the mid-90s. They all have like fancy, cool-looking clothes and small jackets, from the mid-90s, and some of them have like baggy pants, so they all kind of look. It has a very 90s, mid-90s charm to it. That arcadey 95, 96 era of a fighting game that has really been lost in the past 10, 15 years. But King of Fighters Collection, the Orochi Saga, I was really lucky when I got this too. I remember seeing this at HMV. I got it for like $16 or something. It was only like $15 or $16. I was like, holy smokes, man. Like I had to get it immediately. Usually when you buy something like a collection, they're usually like $30, $40 brand new at the stores, especially at Best Buy. So I was lucky that day, and I didn't know this, but in the past like couple of years, past 2 or 3 years, this collection has increased in price in the market. Like if you take a look at the video game pricing. This has gone up. It's like $30 to $40 now, even used, used and complete or whatever with the instruction manuals and all that. But even still, like it's risen up in price. So I think it's because it's a great collection. It's a great collection of 2D fighting games from the mid '90s. It's a quality, a lot of value for your buck kind of collection. Alright, number 13. Number 13 is SpiderMan 2. This one came out in 2004. A classic, awesome superhero comic book game. I think for the longest time, this was the best superhero game for years. You know, this one came out and to ride along the accompanying Spider-Man film, or to accompany the Spider-Man 2 movie. This one is a classic. This one is one of the best comic book based titles. It's an open world game, or you know what we considered open world back in the day, where it's like GTA, you know, GTA Spider-Man style. So you're Spider-Man and you're swinging around this massive city and you are fighting enemies and bad guys, and you're, you know, completing little missions and side quests. It's just an awesome game. I've reviewed this already on my channel. You know, I compare this against Ultimate Spider-Man, which is a pretty fun game as well. You know, it's another worthy Spider-Man game. But this one I felt was a little bit better. Great consistent graphics. It doesn't have as many glitches as Ultimate Spider-Man. It has great gameplay. I love swinging around the city. It's very liberating. It's the best way I can put it. It makes you feel like you are Spider-Man, swinging from building to building to building, and it's just, you know, Black Cat looks hot. She's sexy in this game. It's just it's a really cool installment, and probably still, if not like top 2 or top 3 best superhero video games or comic book based video games of all time. You know, so even with the Arkham series and all the other new games that came out, Spider-Man 2 is still one of the best by far. Coming in at number 12. Number 12 is Manhunt 2. This one came out, released in 2007. Manhunt 2 to me is one of the most underrated like sequels and just video games in general for the PS2. This one is a sequel to the original Manhunt. I think the first one came out in 2004, but I never really got into that one. I never really played it. But this one, from what I understand, they improved the controls, the execution style. I just love this game. I love playing it. I've beaten it at least a couple of times. You know what I'm saying? So it's just enjoyable. It gives you the satisfying feeling when you're taking care of the enemies, when you're coming up behind them and you're choking them or something like that, or you're using that shank or whatever kind of weapon that's available, and you're finishing off your opponent. It really makes you feel like this sadistic stalker assassin type of character. I mean, you're not an assassin. You're an escaped prisoner with some psychological issues, but it's very dark. It's just a really dark experience. You know, it's a very dark video game with a really dark storyline. A lot of psychological horror and a lot of psychological, not even horror, but just psychological storytelling. And like his, you know, because the main character's mind is affected, so he's seeing these visions, and you know, he's got head issues. He's always like, what's going on? He's hearing voices in his head. And oh man, it's a very twisted game, but I love it, and it would be awesome if they made another sequel to this game. I really miss this franchise. I wish they made like a Manhunt 3 or a Manhunt 4 or whatever, you know, just a new updated version with better graphics and even improved gameplay, because this game is just it's a classic to me. It's a really fun, addictive execution type of game where you're sneaking around, you're hiding in the shadows, you're hiding in corners, you're hiding behind cars, and then you're attacking your enemies from behind, and you're, you know, taking care of them, and then you're dragging away their body when you finish them off, and you're dumping them, or you're trying to hide them away from the other enemies so that they don't see it. Oh, Manhunt 2, classic. Alright, number 11. Grand Theft Auto Vice City came out in 2002. I already talked about this before, but this is an awesome open world, probably my favorite in the GTA series. I love the music. I love the new wave, the 80s soundtrack. It is incredible to listen to. Just going inside a vehicle, a car or something like that, and just tuning into the radio and just driving around the city and the environments. Hopefully one day they make a new GTA game based on Vice City. You know what I'm saying? So based on the actual city itself, and also set in the 1980s, because that would be cool to kind of relive the 1980s thing again. Although, I mean, I don't know if they really want to do that again, because Vice City already did it. You know, it's a classic. It's one of the best open world or pseudo open world action adventure third person shooters and crime video games released, and it's I can't say enough good things about it. It's a classic. I guess the only problem I have is that I never really got too far into it because of the freezing glitch that I experienced with my copy. You know, I would always freeze in a certain mission, which was extremely annoying. Alright, number 10. Number 10 is Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition Remix. This one came out in 2006, although I think the first dub edition was in 2005. But this one is the updated or the newer version remix. It's a really awesome street racing game. This is probably my favorite pure racing game on the PS2. Just pure racing alone, just in terms of actual racing segments. Good looking graphics. It still looks pretty good to this day. It has been 11 years since it came out, so it's been a long time. It's been over a decade. Still really fun to play. Great controls, great driving controls, very accessible, very easy to master and get used to. You want to keep playing it over and over and over again. I mean, that's why I love this game so much. The soundtrack is pretty good. And, I mean, out of all the different street racing games, so, you talk about, like, Need for Speed and the Underground series, Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition Remix is, it is a really fun game, and I don't want to ever get rid of it from my collection. This is a keeper. This is a game that you want to keep in your PS2 library because you want to go back to it every now and then and enjoy an awesome racing experience. Alright, number 9. Number 9 is Timesplitters Future Perfect. Alright, this one dropped in 2005, a sequel to Timesplitters II. This one is probably the best first-person shooter on the PlayStation 2. At least my favorite, because it's got that classic gameplay, that classic arcadey FPS deathmatch style shooting experience. A lot of different characters to choose from. There's a ton of different characters. They all look kind of wacky and different and unique. You got several different stages. A lot of them, the different stages are pretty cool. There's different modes of gameplay. I think there's like capture the bag and survival, all kinds of different things to do as far as multiplayer mode. So this is a really fun, like, party type of game that carries on that traditional FPS deathmatch type of thing from the 1990s. So games like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, and even something like a Quake or a Unreal Tournament. This one is a similar title that has that addictive, I gotta play it over and over and over again. It's like many years before games like Overwatch and things like that and Call of Duty ever blew up. I think Future Perfect, Timesplitters Future Perfect is one of the most addictive first-person shooters ever. Okay, number 8. Number 8 is Gun. This one came out in 2005. I love Gun. This is, I wouldn't call it underrated, because it did get a lot of praise and critical acclaim when it came out, and it also sold a lot of copies. So it's not underrated, but rather, it just doesn't get talked about enough. When you see these lists, you'll go on the internet and you type up all these PS2 top 10 or top 50 lists, and you never see Gun. You hardly ever see it. This is an epic Western-themed game, or I should say revisionist Western. I looked it up and it said revisionist Western, which is basically, I guess, just a, it's a Western theme, but like they change it up a little bit. They mess around with the history. But great gameplay. It's an open world type of game, kind of like GTA. It's basically GTA, but set in the Western old school environment with gunslingers and cowboys and Indians and that kind of thing. So, you have to basically go through many different trials and tribulations. I mean, it's just an epic storyline. The most comparable game I can compare this to would be something like Red Dead Redemption, which came out years later. But so Gun on the PS2, it's basically the PS2's Red Dead Redemption, you know. And I'm not talking about Red Dead Revolver. Forget Red Dead Revolver. Forget that title. Gun is the real Western-themed, awesome, epic experience on the PlayStation 2. I believe it also came out on the Xbox and the Xbox 360 later on. But for the PS2, really fun game to play. Large worlds, large environments. You know, you're traveling mostly with a horse. You're riding this horse, and you're traversing through these large, epic Western. You know, the open world. It's just a beautiful game. You know, just an awesome experience. You get to fight against animals, you know, like wild creatures and wild animals. I think you could fight off against a wolf or a bear or something like that. You know, it's one of those games where you fight against the wilderness. You're fighting off against other enemies that have guns, and they're all shooting at you, and you know, it's just a long storyline to it. It's a very lengthy game that has a lot of things to do. The best way I can put it is it's GTA in the Old West, basically. Very fun. Okay, number 7. Speaking of GTA, number 7 is Grand Theft Auto San Andreas from 2004. I've already spoke about how much I like this game. Great music, great gameplay, very huge worlds. It's just like Gun, but set in the modern world. It's a, well, not modern, but it's a 90s version, a 90s modern world version of Gun, or the other way around, whatever the case is. San Andreas came out first, came out in 2004, so I guess Gun is biting. But anyway, San Andreas, really fun game, huge worlds, big cities to explore. Some customization for your character, just a lot of different like mini activities and quests. Very long storyline. You know, it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And after a while, you know, you do get kind of tired of it. You get kind of bored of it. Not bored, but just you know, you get kind of suffocated with so much gameplay. Very enjoyable, you know. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. The graphics, admittedly, I mean, obviously, you know, this is 2004 graphics, so the graphics haven't like aged super well, but still for the time, and you know, it still is a pretty solid experience. The gameplay is still really fun. It's a precursor to games and franchises like Saints Row. I mean, you can obviously tell that the Saints Row franchise, especially the first 2 Saints Row games, took a lot of influence from San Andreas. You know, as far as like the shooting mechanics and, you know, driving around, having that fixed camera thing with the motorcycle segment, you know, when you're shooting behind you. The gang element where you're spray painting over enemy tags and stuff like that, or other bomb tags. You know, whatever they call it, bombing or graffiti or whatever. You're spray painting them. That whole gang element of being a part of, you know, a street gang, basically. San Andreas, very cool game. Again, just a massive world. You can tell they put a lot of effort in making this game. They took a lot of time and energy and money creating such a huge game. Number 6, Burnout 3 Takedown, came out in 2004. Burnout 3 is probably the best racing / like action racing game that I've ever experienced on the PS2. It's so fun, it's so addictive, and it's so enjoyable, especially the crash mode. Now, I mentioned before that Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition Remix is the best pure racing game. But with Burnout 3, it's more than just a racing game. It has racing elements, but it also has elements of the crash mode. I mean, I love the crashing thing where you're driving your vehicle, whatever it is. It could be a truck. It could be a four-wheeler. It could be a minivan. You know, and you're basically making it explode. You're basically driving it in the middle of traffic or in the middle of this jumbled piles of these car piles. These it's just a very chaotic game. A lot of explosions, and that's what it's meant to be. It's supposed to be this addictive, arcadey, action game or explosion game, whatever you want to call it. This demolition game, basically. And good gameplay, great soundtrack, pretty good graphics. The graphics have held up really, really well, and I can't say enough good things about Burnout 3 Takedown. It's one of the best racing / action explosion games you can ever find. Alright, coming in at number 5 is Tekken 5. This one came out in 2005. A lot of 555s here. So, Tekken 5 is... I already talked about how much I love this game. Great graphics, excellent stage designs, great soundtrack, very memorable soundtrack. Probably, this might be the best fighting game soundtrack of all time. That's how good the soundtrack is. Now, you can think of other ones. You could think of the Guilty Gear franchise, for example, has really good music, and Street Fighter II. And that's all fine and dandy, but Tekken 5 has a solid soundtrack that is... to this day, I still like hum, and I still think about like the soundtrack of the Tekken 5 video game. And like for the longest time, like I always wanted the CD. You know, like I want to buy the CD, I want to buy the Tekken 5 soundtracks somehow, some way. I want to get it. And eventually I just downloaded it off the internet and burnt it on a blank disc. But that's how much I love the soundtrack of Tekken 5. So having great gameplay, because you know the gameplay, it takes a long time to master the characters and really get acclimated to every single control layout of each character, like their moveset and all that, and mastering their combos and different combinations and juggles. It takes a long time, but it's very, very addictive. I've played this game so much that I can't even tell you how long I've been playing this game. Since like 2006, I've been enjoying Tekken 5. Alright, number 4. Number 4 is God of War. Came out in 2005. One of the best action-adventure games of all time. This was influenced by Devil May Cry and previous other action-adventure games, but it perfected it. It darn near became one of the greatest games. It is one of the greatest games, but it darn near became like this super complete, perfect video game for me. It's sexy, it's alpha male, it's aggressive, it's got brutality, blood, violence, an epic storyline, very easy controls, and very addictive gameplay. That's you know, it makes you want to keep playing it over and over again. It makes you feel empowered as you go through the game. And I can understand, like some people have said this game is overrated, and I can understand that because not everybody's going to be a fan of these critically acclaimed games. You know, everybody has their own personal taste, but this one is right up my alley because it's just jam-packed with so much action, and it caters to every guy. Like it's a guy's like macho dream or whatever. It's like a fantasy for like macho, you know. It's just cool. Like it's just a cool anti-hero character. You know, he gets all these hot women. You know, and he's man, I love God of War, the first one. And the soundtrack is really good too. Epic soundtrack, so memorable. You know that. Dun 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 dun. That might have been I don't know. That might have been the sequel, but yeah, you guys know what I mean. I mean, just an awesome, incredible soundtrack. All right, number 3. Number 3 is the Mega Man X Collection. This one came out in 2006. All right, so we've seen the Mega Man Anniversary Collection from, I believe that one came out in 2004 or 2003, something like that. I think 2004. But this one is the follow-up. This is the X Collection, which is a new version or a different version of the Mega Man character. He's got a different suit. I loved Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo. I grew up on that game on the SNES. You know, I love Mega Man X. So as a kid, when I grew up on that and enjoyed playing it, it became a part of my childhood memory and became one of those really enjoyable, like fond memories of gaming in the 90s. So by the mid-late 2000s, I really wanted to get Mega Man X collection on the PS2 because it has Mega Man X in it. And this has multiple Mega Man X games. It's got like different ones. Mega Man X, X2, X3, all the way up to I don't know if it's X5 or X6. Multiple Mega Man X games that I've never really experienced. So I basically I just bought it for Mega Man X, but it's also enjoyable to play the other ones. I do think it's a little bit better than the Anniversary Collection because as much as I like the Anniversary Collection, it's a little bit kind of dated as far as graphics and presentation. I like the updated, more newer feel of Mega Man X Collection and the newer titles. And plus, I love the dashing technique. I love that. It's a little bit more accessible, I think, which is basically means it's a little bit easier. I find that the Anniversary Collection is a little bit more difficult and a lot more punishing than Mega Man X Collection. So, basically you have Mega Man X on the PS2. What more can you ask for? It's so fun. It's such a incredible collection. I love the fact that Capcom actually did it. This was before Capcom became like this controversial, money-hungry, we got to release everything separately and all that, and DLC every single game, and forcing you to buy everything separately. This one, they put everything in a single package, and they just put it out there. They just released it as a complete package, because I guess the mindset back in the day was, well, we can still squeeze some money and get some mileage out of these games that came out a long time ago. Like, well, yeah, we got some old Mega Man games. Let's just put it in a compilation and put it out there. There you go. And just release it for the masses to buy. But it has aged really well. It's classic 2D action platforming, pseudo run and gun shooters or shoot 'em ups. You are shooting across the stages and stuff like that, and getting new weapons and stuff. Good stuff, man. I love Mega Man X, so it's up there. It's still top 3 in the PS2 library. You know what I'm saying? So I loved it on the Super Nintendo, and I still love it on the PlayStation 2. Alright, coming in at number 2 is Shadow of the Colossus. Came out in 2005. This is an epic game. Great boss battles. The atmosphere is nice. The originality of the storyline and the presentation, where you're just this one character, I think his name is Wander, and he's riding this horse, Agro, and you basically have to save this sleeping beauty. You got to save this woman that's sleeping on top of this dais thing, and you have to do whatever you can to help her. It's just an epic experience, from the music, the gameplay. Now, this is not a game that I would play over and over again. I would say that the replay value of this game is very, very low. But it is a game that I think every PS2 owner should play at least once. At least one time in their life, they have to experience this, because it is so unique and so different. It's such an epic experience. You got to try it at least once, because it's that good. And man, I can't praise it enough. It was originally a PS2 exclusive, so that's it made it a PS2 like classic. I know it's been re-released over and over again, like in different platforms and different different ways to get the game now. But Shadow of the Colossus, it's a classic on the PS2. It made the PS2 worth getting. It made the PS2 worth buying back in the mid-2000s. You know what I'm saying? It made this. It's such a unique experience, and I highly recommend it to anybody. All right, so and number one greatest PS2 game of all time is God of War 2. This one came out in 2007, a sequel to the first God of War from 2005, and they basically just improved everything. Just about everything you can think of, they made better with God of War 2. Slightly better graphics. The gameplay is just as fast and furious and addictive as the previous game. It's got this more epic feel to it, and more thumping music, and more epic boss fights. And I know I'm using the word epic a lot. That's what this game is. But just bigger boss fights, more of them. The segments are just so God. It's just such a stylistically cool-looking game. They really took their time and effort to really create this masterpiece. Look, I like Devil May Cry. I love God of War. I really enjoy some of these titles, but this one is the action-adventure experience that I think anybody could enjoy. And again, it's one of those games that some people are going to be like, well, it's kind of overrated. It's overrated. And that's fine, but to me, this is the perfect game for a guy like me. Single player, great storyline, awesome graphics, great soundtrack, anti-hero, super cool character, main protagonist. It's sexy, it's got hot chicks in it with, topless chicks. I mean, it's got the epic storyline of you trying to defeat a really tough boss. You know what I'm saying? It's building up to something, and it's building up to something. It's building up to an epic fight. I mean, it's not perfect. I don't think any of these games are perfect. I don't think any video game is perfect. So that whole 10 out of 10 thing is very difficult to get a 10 out of 10. But this one is pretty high up there. Like, I would give this game like a 9.5 or a 9 point something. Just a high score, you know what I'm saying? It does have negatives, it's not a perfect game, it's got some flaws in it. I think the storyline is not that... It's kind of convoluted, it's not that great compared to the first one. This one, it starts to kind of become really dumb and really stupid, and you're just like scratching your head, like, what? Because the first God of War was about Kratos going up against Ares. Very simple, straight to the point. You got the good guy, you got the bad guy, you got this established history, and one of them has to beat the other one. Very basic. By the second one, Ares gets defeated by Kratos, so Kratos usurps him and takes his place as the God of War, the new God of War. With God of War 2, now all of a sudden he's feuding up against Zeus, and you're like, what the heck? Like, what? What's going on here? Like, all of a sudden Zeus is evil, he's a jerk, he's a bad guy, he's a villain, and he's anti-Kratos. So the way that they did that was kind of sloppy and just kind of dumb to me. But aside from that, everything else is just really cool in this game. Everything else was just the way that it built and the way that they... I don't know. Everything about this game is pretty much awesome and epic, and even like the bonus content. I love the bonus content that they include, like bonus making of footage, like the making of God of War, and they got the people at Santa Monica Studios or whatever that's working on the game, and the bonus interviews with the voice actors and stuff like that, and the people that worked on the game. Like, even those additions and the bonus missions and stuff, they're also part of this quality like package. It's also part of the experience, and the whole thing is just so awesome. It's like getting like this epic like DVD collection of like a great series of movies. Like the Lord of the Rings trilogy or something, with all the bonus content and all that back in the early 2000s, and just getting this complete package, this awesome piece of entertainment. So overall, God of War 2 to me is the best PS2 game of all time. Anybody can enjoy it and have fun with it. And to anybody that's too stupid or too pathetic to appreciate it, I mean, come on. It's not that hard. It can be hard. You can rack up the difficulty and ratchet it up and really make it super difficult. But if you think it's if you think it's unbeatable, and maybe you're just not that good, maybe you're just not a gamer. This game is for gamers. That's the reality of it. So that's it for this episode of the Review Space. I know I've been rambling on for over an hour. There's also a lot of other games that I did not include, like a lot of honorable mentions that I haven't included. A lot of classic titles like Cold Winter and The Suffering Ties That Bind, and Tony Hawk titles. Personally, I love American Wasteland. Well, not love. I really did like it. But I never got into the other Tony Hawk games, like Tony Hawk 4. When I think of other honorable mentions in the PS2 best games of all time, I also want to mention a game called Mark of Cree. Mark of Cree came out in 2002. It's an action-adventure, kind of like a combat melee type of game, almost kind of sort of similar to a God of War. or maybe not as comparable, but even something like Devil May Cry, where the main character has a weapon, he's got like a sword, and he's attacking his enemies. But it's a little bit unique because it depends on, it's like button specific. So the square button attacks a certain opponent, the triangle attacks a different opponent, and the circle button attacks a different opponent. I mean, just like, it's a different way of playing an action-adventure game, and so it feels unique when you engage in combat. So Mark of Cree is another solid game that I want to throw out there because it is relatively underrated. It never really the series itself, because I believe there was also a sequel, it never really blew up. It's a PS2 exclusive, so it only was released on the PlayStation systems from what I remember anyway. And so this Mark of Cree game that came out in the early 2000s, it was never given a lot of attention. Not a lot of people talked about it, and it never. I don't think it was a hot selling game that sold a lot of copies and stuff. So it just kind of got buried underneath other bigger titles at that time, probably underneath like Grand Theft Auto and Vice City. This was 2002. That's when those other games were coming out, and Madden and those other kind of games. All right, another honorable mention I would like to put out there is Mortal Kombat Deception. This one came out in 2004. The Mortal Kombat 3D games on the PS2 are generally pretty decent. Like, they're pretty good fighting games, but Deception is my favorite out of all of them. This one has a really cool mode where you're just roaming around, running around this massive, I think it was like in the Outworld, and you're fighting random opponents. Or not random, but I mean, you go up to different people and you fight them, engage them in combat. But it feels pretty good to run around really fast around these massive levels and stages. And so I generally enjoy Mortal Kombat Deception. The gameplay itself is pretty good. The fighting engine is pretty good. And the only problem really that I could find with Deception is that it doesn't have as many characters as Armageddon. And it's still a really solid title, though. My personal favorite Mortal Kombat game from the PS2 era. Another honorable mention is Sly 2, Band of Thieves, from 2004. This one I've already talked about in the top 100 games list challenges, I should say, the list challenge video that I did. Sly 2 is a solid title too, a great platforming game from I believe it was Sucker Punch. It's my personal favorite out of the Sly series because the gameplay is really good and the storyline is pretty fun and the pacing is really well done. And so I think it's a great game for kids of all ages, a more family-oriented game. Sly 2, you can't go wrong with it. Carmelita Fox segments were really cool and memorable. And this was also, the Sly series itself was kind of a precursor to the Infamous series. So that classic gameplay of like running on rooftops and jumping and the platforming element is... This is an early version of what the Infamous series would become, so it's kind of cool to see it in its earlier stages in the Sly series. Sly 2, Band of Thieves, solid entry. Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, I really enjoyed it. SmackDown vs. Raw, I like SmackDown vs. Raw 2000. There's like a 2006 one installment in there. I enjoyed some of the SmackDown vs. Raw games. Shut Your Mouth, SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance, Guitar Hero 2, EA Sports F1 2002, Scarface, The World Is Yours, a really cool Scarface game, Beatdown, Fists of Vengeance from 2005, Madden NFL 2004, even though I never really got into the NFL games. I heard a lot that, the one that came out in 2003, which is NFL 2004, was really, really good, like for a Madden game. So there's a lot of other titles, Soul Calibur 2, a lot of other like really good video games that I didn't even include, but I felt like they were not as good as this top 30, just not as... They're not as classic, they're not as must-play and must-buy. These are the ones that you got to check out. Top 30. I try to be as diverse as much as I can, including different genres, all the way from shooters and sports and single-player beat-em-ups and action type games. Yeah, it's all about having fun. Again, that's it for this episode of the Review Space. thank you guys for watching. Check out the channel for more content and videos and reviews and things like that. And until next time, peace.